You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor, subscribe to the channel, leave your comments below, and be sure to smash that like button. So Brian Kelly was on the SEC Coaches Teleconference earlier today and was asked about Jayden Daniels point blank and his Heisman candidacy, if that would impact how LSU uses him, meaning, of course, you need him to stat compile, but you're playing an overmatched opponent, so do you maybe pull back the reins? Here's what he said.
What we do is try to play the kind of football that has been the hallmark of this offense. And so you want to feel as though that you're playing to that standard. And then you evaluate it from quarter to quarter. So it's really immaterial about the opposition. We'll judge this based upon our standard of play and go from there.
For whatever it's worth, we saw Jayden Daniels against Army, and he was 11 of 15 for 279 and 3 touchdowns. He only ran the ball 5 times. There were 6 yards in that game. So the rushing stats weren't there, but the passing numbers were gaudy. LSU won the game 62-0. Might remind you that Jayden Daniels threw for 279 and 3 touchdowns in the first half. So this is a Georgia State squad that has really struggled defensively over the last 3 weeks. And the opportunity for LSU to go stat compile in the first half is going to be there. Georgia State, the last 3 games have allowed 44, 42, 42. So, and that was to Georgia Southern, James Madison, and App State. No disrespect to any of those squads. I know James Madison's undefeated right now, but this is Jayden Daniels and the number 1 offense in the country in Tiger Stadium, and LSU, if they go play clean football in the first half, will be able to do whatever they want moving up and down the field. My kind of hope is that the defense stinks, and so you have to play Jayden throughout, maybe through 3 quarters, and he can maybe stack compile even further. But the bigger question surrounding Jayden is not about what's going to happen this week against Georgia Southern. It's, of course, the Heisman Trophy, but then also the draft. And if you haven't been paying attention, there was some interesting news last week and earlier this week about the draft. There's a general consensus that Caleb Williams, Drake May are 1, 2 in whatever order. But then after that, it's a very deep draft class that includes Jayden Daniels, but also Michael Penix and Bo Nix and Michael Pratt from Tulane. There's a long list of quarterbacks in this year's draft class that are very appealing. And 2 of them might not be in this draft class. Last week, Deion Sanders was a guest on the Dan Patrick Show. We played this for you, but just as a reminder, Dan asked Deion about Shedeur. Here's what Deion offered in this interview.
If it's a package deal with you and Shedeur.
Don't forget Shiloh, by the way. Don't forget Shiloh.
Eventually he's coming.
Yeah, they're going to come out the same year, next year.
Okay.
They better not try to leave Daddy this year.
So Deion just said they're going to leave the same year next year. They better not try to leave Daddy. So Deion essentially said last week that Shedeur is going back to Colorado. So if Shedeur's not in the draft, I mean, that's a guy who had seen his stock elevate dramatically to where some had him as the 3rd or 4th best quarterback in this draft class. Quinn Ewers at Texas is another one. And I'm not sure if you saw this report, but Bobby Burton over at Inside Texas had this report earlier this year. Quote, the decision may already have been made, but it's the decision may have already been made, but it's at least 90% right now that Quinn Ewers is expected to return to Texas next season. So, point being, if you were looking at draft boards and draft eligible quarterbacks, Caleb Williams, Drake May, and then some combination of Quinn Ewers, Shedeur Sanders, Michael Penix, Bo Nix, and then somewhere down the line is where you saw Jayden Daniels. Well, you're seeing Daniels' stock elevate, and maybe 2 guys that were presumed ahead of him take their names out of the draft. It's not official yet. We'll see. But this is really interesting to watch. Jordan Reed, who's one of the ESPN draft analysts, was ranking his top 14 draft quarterback prospects, and he had Jayden Daniels number 6. But let's talk about Jayden Daniels rising that draft board.
If you would have told me that this was the same guy that we saw at Arizona State, I would have laughed at you. Like, he's improved so much. And the big worry about Daniels, even coming into the season, was that he just leaves the pocket prematurely. He didn't have any pocket patience, and then the accuracy was all over the place. And then you combine that with the slender frame as well. And he's a little bit chaotic as a runner too. Like, he just takes some massive hits, so he needs to learn to protect himself. But Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr., two players that are also surging up boards as well. He just created so much chemistry with him. Like, the deep accuracy is outstanding. He has so much more pocket patience. His progressions are really good. They're clean, but he's so dangerous as a runner. We saw it last week against Florida, of where, like, he looked like Lamar Jackson out there. Like, he was just slicing them. He was slicing them. And it was so amazing to watch him play, just because he was so in sync and he's in rhythm. So with him and J.J. McCarthy, I think that quarterback 3 spot is going to be really interesting. Like, I think he could get that high. And there's a lot of people that really like Jayden Daniels. And similar to Bo Nix, you kind of have to wash your hands and your memory as far as what they were from their last stop. With Bo Nix being at Auburn, and then now Jayden going away from Arizona State at LSU. Like, these are completely different players. They're completely different, and the transfer portal has really helped them.
It's stunning to hear, for me anyway, someone even presume that J.J. McCarthy could be ranked ahead of Jayden Daniels. Like, in what reality would a human being look at Jayden Daniels and J.J. McCarthy and go, give me the kid from Michigan who they ran the ball on 32 consecutive plays and didn't even ask him to throw a pass in the second half? Like, that there's no reality where that makes sense to me. But what do I know about the draft? And it's not just Jordan Reed who's basically saying, look, I mean, there are some people who may have Jayden Daniels number 3 on their quarterback board. Dane Brugler, who's a draft analyst for The Athletic, talked about Daniels' rising draft projection.
His draft projection feels a lot like Deshaun Watson's was coming out of Clemson. Remember, we weren't talking about him as Deshaun Watson as a slam dunk first round pick. And I say we, I mean a collective we, NFL teams, all of us on the outside, everyone in the league. Collectively, we were talking about him as, a top 50 guy, but maybe an early 2, maybe he gets in the first round. Like, weren't really sure exactly where Deshaun Watson was going to go, even though he had this tremendous resume. And then lo and behold, he ends up going 12 overall. And so that feels kind of the same way with Jayden Daniels.
Quarterbacks are valued so much, and we see it at the top of every draft. Last year, you saw Bryce Young go 1 and C.J. Stroud go number 2. Anthony Richardson went number 4. I mean, you're going to see quarterback-needy teams pull the trigger. The really interesting thing about last year, though, is that after those first 3 guys, there wasn't another in round 1. Could a team see value mid-late round 1, a quarterback-needy team mid-late round 1, in a guy like Jayden Daniels? Perhaps. And there's going to be a lot of quarterback-needy teams in this year's draft. Jayden Daniels surging up forward may find himself as high as 3. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.